A versatile shliach tzibur and performer, Cantor Maissner has mastered a variety of musical styles, from Jewish Renaissance and early Hebrew art music to contemporary Canadian, American, and Israeli compositions. He has been performed in theaters worldwide and has been featured with several symphony orchestras. At the invitation of the Center of Jewish Music in Hanover, Germany, he returned to his father's home city to participate in a concert commemorating the 70th anniversary of Kristallnacht. More recently, he appeared in The Night, the Holocaust Project. Additionally, the Cantor consulted and sang on documentary films for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, including To Mend the World and The Man Who Hid Anne Frank, produced by Harry Rasky. Holding a bachelor's degree in cantorial music from Hebrew Union College, a master's degree in music history, voice and performance from Temple University, and honorary doctorates from Hebrew Union College and Jewish Theological Seminary, Cantor is highly sought after lecturer, teacher, coach, and mentor with an encyclopedic knowledge of Jewish, secular, and liturgical music. In recognition of his significant contribution to the reconciliation between Christians and Jews and Germans and Jews, and for restoring and preserving the Jewish musical heritage of Germany, Cantor Maissner was awarded the Cross of the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, Germany's highest civilian honor. And this, my friends, is an abbreviated bio. And now it is my pleasure to present Cantor Benny Maissner.
Bernice, the more you go, the shorter the program will be.
I'm done.
Anyway, let me just share the screen. Hello, everybody. I know many of you. Alex, of course, I don't see the whole gallery because I see my picture. So I'm going to share the screen and we're going to start. Okay. בימים ההם, בזמן הזה, and when the Cantors ruled the earth, I plagiarized this title from a friend of mine, Jackie Mendelson, who made this when he did a presentation about the Cantorate. בימים ההם, בזמן הזה.
אתה יודע, רוזי יולום, רוזי יולום. אתה יודע, רוזי יולום. עדים הנחלה, אדו שם אלוהינו ואלוהי אבו אצלנו ליואלה. רב בניתו, גודו ארברה, שתחדי סולנו, שתחדי סולנו, אסחו תססה. אני קדושם בכל דרכיו וכל עושים בכל לוצץ מן השבת וממהרים לא בואי ממקום חומקנו סופיה ממקום חומקנו סופיה ותהיה מלאי חולנו כי מחכים אנחנו לוצץ מן השבת.
What we just heard is an experience, in fact, the subject of today's presentation. These are the sounds of most sophisticated art form, the art of Chazanut, blossoming out of a solid foundation and rich heritage, which we call the backbones of synagogue liturgical chant, whose owners are the honored titled, the Baal Tfilah, Precentor, Shaliach Tzibur, Paitan, Chazan, and the Master of Tfilah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in 1707, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto wrote Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Righteous. In introduction, he says, everything that I'm going to tell you, it's about the Musar movement that he started. Everything that I'm going to tell you now is self-evidence. It just has to be highlighted. These are matter of facts. So this presentation is not going to be an academic one, because there are much more learned musicologists that I am, but it's a sensual and experiential sound of what led up to the golden age of Chazanut and the transition into the next generation, namely my generation and my colleagues. So here we begin. Its origin can be found in the Song of the Levites at the temple worship in Jerusalem. After the destruction, the Jews spread and dispersed throughout the diaspora, and the function of the Chazan, the Shaliach Tzibur, took different aspects and evolved over centuries. And for centuries it kept its loyalty and aspiration to the tradition of Eretz Israel. In later generations, the tie between the Yeshuv in the land of Israel and Yeshuv in Eretz and the diaspora grew far apart. And the skills of the Chazan, the officiant, the precentor, was split into three groups, mainly, and that's in very general, Ashkenazic, Sephardim, and Yemenite, which is Middle East. Today, we can only glance momentarily into the... Today, we can only momentarily glance into the history and the development of the Chazan over the centuries, with dealing only with the golden age of Chazanut, of course, East and West Europe. The Western Ashkenazic Chazanut, which was directly influenced by the mood and by the event which took place in hostile surroundings. Programs befell the wider communities and the fate of the wandering Jew. The Chazan, the emissary of the people, expressed his mood with his creative song and melody. The term Chazan was transformed many times throughout this generation. The root of the word Chazan is chazo, from vision, namely, or among many, a description and explanation, to observe and oversee. Among the many duties of the Chazan throughout the ages, the functioning was as a shamash, the ritual custodian of the synagogue. He also functioned as a Baal Koreh, the Torah reader, and the Paitan, the creator of religious poetry. It's only by the 7th century that the growth of the piyut and the increasing musical development of the worship service, the function of the Chazan emerged into a fully professional appointed position and became officially the sacred calling of the Shaliach Tzibur, the emissary of the people. During the medieval times, the horrific persecution of the Jew, the song of the Chazan and its art suffered greatly. The quality of Jewish liturgical music was blemished, and Chazanim, instead of nourishing and safeguarding the old tradition elements of synagogue music, chose to trivialize new and local melodies for prayers, of course, acculturation in the local communities where the Jews lived. Even the effort of the Italian Renaissance composer Salomone Rossi, whose activities are noticed between 1580 and 1625, to redeem the synagogue from its popular wave of introducing the glorious choral music into the synagogue service, was not met with great success. Salomone Rossi, it's a subject on its own. He was the Duke of Mantua, the musician of Mantua, and a very secular, successful composer, but he wrote for the first time with the encouragement of rabbis of Vienna and Florence to write synagogue music. Almost to the end of the Middle Ages, the art of the Chazanut, the art of the Chazan, was an oral craft. Most Chazanim could not even read music. Of course, there are a lot of documents from the 16th, 15th, 17th century about writings of Chazanim talking about meshorerim and choirs and the cantors that used to abuse their voices and criticism of one another. Nothing changes this the same way as today. So this is a very synopsis and short history, not academic, just to bring you up to the beginning of the 19th century, where the modern term of Chazanut began, which led to the golden age of Chazanut. The father figure of the modern cantorate is the renowned Salomon Sulzer, who lived between 1804 and 1890. He single-handedly rescued and redeemed Western music of the synagogue. He elevated the sacred art of praying from its banal and primitive status. He was the first Chazan ever who was an accomplished musician and knowledgeable in harmony and Jewish modes. His musical style is a distinct combination of the old with the new. His was the first attempt to present modal, non-Western harmony into Jewish liturgical music. I will not go into the theory of it because I want us to listen to many more voices, as you will see in a couple of minutes. In his volume Shirei Zion, which includes prayers for the entire liturgical calendar, his composition exposed for the first time choral music for four-part voices, and their renditions influenced the uniqueness in adhering to Nusach HaTfilah, the prescribed prayer mode, to the specific time of the prayer. So just listen to one or two samples of his music, of course, Western Europe. Not only was Israel Alter my uncle, but he was really the first and the most exponent and presenter of the Western European tradition, because he was the Oberkantor, the chief cantor, from 1925 to 1935, and he was actually the closest in this style to the art of Salomon Sulzer. And there's much more, but I'm going to go move in a minute to the next presentation. As Vienna was and is to this day a musical center, its famous composers such as Franz Schubert, Liszt, Meyerbeer and Paganini honored Sulzer not only once attempting the prayer service. Franz Liszt writes, "In Vienna we have heard the famous tenor Cantor Salomon Sulzer. There we could connect with his soul and through him to get to know the music of their ancestors." Sulzer was also a very close friend of Franz Schubert, who considered him to be the authority and authentic exponent of his composition. In his honor, Schubert wrote at the age of 30 a composed Tov Lehodot, the Psalm for the Sabbath day, number 92, and it was published in the volume of Sulzer's music Shirei Zion. This rendition was performed by my choir in the Speer Hall in Nuremberg. Okay, so this was Sulzer. What happened in East Europe? In East European, however, cantorial art kept its traditional and somewhat oriental flavor. Here it was the Baal Tfilah, the Master of Tfilah, who was the heart of the people through his devotion and sincerity in praying, even though he may not have the most glorious voice. So here's David Brenner, my other uncle, who was my mother's brother, a Baal Tfilah second to none. If you see here many of these Leib Glanz, these are Chazanim from Israel. This is Binyamin Unger. David Brenner, my uncle, established the Society for Jewish Music in the 50s called Lachan, of which I then named my choir.
Luces mina Shabbos umemarim lovoi nimekoi kumakinu Sophia.
You'll see in a minute how this Baal Tfilah style influenced the East European Chazanut.
Bar mitzvah, meye ben rein mozovit marachayim avetir chazan.
This is the Ya'amod, which my uncle used to call me to the Torah. In this particular Misheberach on Ya'amod, he calls his son, which we grew up together in a little shtibel in Sderot Ben Gurion, right 2 blocks from Ben Gurion's home in Tel Aviv. So the Baal Tfilah really was the center and the cradle of the Chazanut, which developed later. Later on, we witnessed cantors of East European training who carried out the traditional style as well as being versatile in musical knowledge. At first, the East European Chazan rejected the Western style and Sulzer innovation. They called it Galachish, not Jewish. And soon enough, that style of the West European musical tradition with choirs and of course with instrument in the Reform and the Liberal thing, although in Hanover it was the totally Orthodox synagogue and only a men's choir, but all Eastern Europe, all the way down to northern Italy, to Livorno in Italy, the style of the grand cantorial music with choirs. So there were centers such as Berlin, Vienna, Paris, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and all. 2 important personalities that influenced and characterized is Pinchas Binkowski, who wrote this Shir HaMalot that everybody knows, Shir HaMalot Beshuv Adonai, 1859 to 1924, from Odessa. He entitled the father of the new song in Israel as Sulzer. Abraham Bernstein, musical contribution 1866 to 1932 from Vilna, was called Chazanut HaSkala, the art of the intellectual mind. So here for a moment I want to explain to you what I came to realize through the teachings of my mentors, starting with Dr. Eric Werner, who is a great musicologist, Mark Kligman, who is a great musicologist today, and of course Joe Levine, Professor Joe Levine. What distinguished especially Eastern European from the West in the approach of the cantorial art was the mixture of the intellect and the outburst of emotional expression, namely it's known as Chazanut HaRegesh, the lev, the heart. Chazanut HaSeder, the orderly and carefully planned out categories, calculated the exponent of the former and the mentor. So in the West we have Lewandowski and Sulzer and Birnbaum and some of the Western European musicians, but in the East it was Nissi Belzer, that was also lived between 1824 and 1906. This striving for the order aesthetics was adopted by influence, as I said, by Sulzer and Lewandowski, while the inner spark and the traditional emotional sigh and intuitive outburst was received from Nissi Belzer. That's in synopsis a little bit what I'm going to share with you now. Even it sounds like Chazanut, it is still a sample of the calculated by Israel Alter, who went back to Lemberg to get dressed in a kapota and a streimer because his father was the Av Beit Din of Lemberg. And this is my aunt Hanale on the side there. There's a personal story, an anecdote about this dreidel Chaim. When I was a child, Israel Alter came before my bar mitzvah and I showed him what I know because I was studying with the great rabbis, the mentor of a whole generation of Balei Tfilah and Chazanim, and I said to him, "Can you give me this music?" He said, "I'll give it to you, but who's going to sing it for you?" So even though it sounds like Eastern European, I must tell you that later years I understood that he calculated every dray and every nuance of this coloratura. There are, of course, other example which I will not, because I want to continue. And so this is Chazanut HaSeder, which we talked about in a second. But listen now to a little bit of Chazanut HaRegesh, the outburst of the Cantor. Even if it was improvised and written down and then arranged with choir or just accompaniment, it is known as the outburst. And one of the two of the greatest, to my mind, of course, is Mordechai Hershman in Modim. The greatest, the Zogar, the greatest improviser, who never sang the same way, a composition that he wrote himself, is but another example of Ata Yodea Razei Olam, which is also my favorite piece. This style is also called the Zogachts. In Yiddish, of course, Zogen is to speak. So in the middle tessatura, in the middle range of the Chazan, his outpouring of his emotion, of course, it's tied into the words that he wants to express. I'm catching a little bit faster because I want to get to some other things. So, the grand choruses of Eastern European synagogue and the style of Sulzer, the style was identified, as I said before, as a Western Galachish, meaning it was sung like a churchy. And here are some examples of what happened in West Europe with the magnificent voices.
El parol, riduco
So most of this cantorial were either baritone or tenors, like a Wagnerian tenor, like Israel Alter was. That the Maissner was the traditional arrangement, but the middle part, because the Maissner has like more than six verses, that he improvised that, and that is one short example of West European. We can do a whole lecture of the West European situation. But in East Europe, of course, we have two great people. From Slichot, El Melech Yoshev by Zilberts, which is a grand piece of music.
וזכור לנו היום בריצ'ה משה ישראל כמו שהודעתו לענן מקדם וירד עד השם
This was Zilberts. This is Lialof, one of the great East European composers. Two of the most famous songs, Yadudale, and another one, Adin Torah Midgot. So here is Uvashofar Gadol, which is one of the great pieces. Needless to say that these two East European composers, of course, were influenced by Russian composer and Russian and even some Gregorian chant, but the grand of the choruses between Sulzer, Lewandowski, Minkowski, and all the great choral musicians amalgamated to a incredible style, which was not only in the concerts but centers in European synagogues in East Europe. Dunayevsky and Novakovsky and choruses that used to be called the choral shul. The choral shul, where the Chazan was the great ruling of the earth, of course, and gigantic orchestration. Sometimes, in a minute, I will talk to you about the influence of opera on Chazanut. So the choral shul used to have like choirs of 60 men and children. With this phenomenon and development, it was natural to see the status of the Chazan rise to unprecedented heights. Among those who built the new concept of Chazanut in the late 19th century were people like Samuel Namberg, Blumenthal, David Novakovsky, and other composers. Many volumes of manuscript compositions for cantor and choir, covering the entire gamut of synagogue music for the whole year. They began the foundation and the backbones of synagogue of our time. And it is that period between the end of the 19th century and the 40s of the 20th century that is known the golden age of Chazanut. The virtuosity of this art and its period came to its full bloom. Synagogues were filled to capacity, concert hall throughout the world, east and west alike full of Jews and non-Jews, who passionately flocked to listen to the great voices of the sweet singers of Israel. The radio recordings and the movie industry contributed greatly to the advancements of this art and penetrated every Jewish home. Recordings in the thousands flooded the world of Chazanut, influenced greatly the world of classical music. Here an example. For example, as early as Beethoven, we hear clearly how he used the theme of Kol Nidre in his string quartet B minor, opus 131. Saint-Saëns used the theme of Samson and Delilah, the high holiday melody for V'nislach lechol adat bnei Israel, which we just recited, of course, on Yom Kippur. The Jewish operetta composer Meyerbeer used the melody for Vayichulu Hashamayim ve'aretz on Friday night before the Kiddush for his entire opera. So popular were some of these great famous cantors, like Gershon Sirota, 1814 to 1943, who unfortunately was in America and then came back to Warsaw and was murdered, of course, during the Holocaust. Some of these great cantors, like Gershon Sirota and Zvulun Kvartin, who lived between 1874 and 1952, was to sing in great numbers for non-Jewish audience, and in fact Gershon Sirota was called to sing in front of the Tsar. But with the uniqueness of their voices, you should see and hear how Zvulun Kvartin, with his magnificent voice, uses the East European Chazanut. Here is a little piece of Tehei Rabbi Ishmael, where the art of the Zogachts and the speaking sort of on a pitch is very noticed. He had a colossal voice, of course. Even though it is beautifully arranged by Mordechai Sobol, of course, his blessed memory, and he repeats the words again and again in the art of the Zogachts, of this sighing and emotional outburst. It is known that Caruso, the father of all opera and the greatest tenor, mentioned that some of the great voices are to be found in the synagogue. He especially mentioned and admired Chazan Yossele Rosenblatt, 1882 to 1933, who died of a heart attack in Israel, of course, in Palestine, who enriched with his incredible voice the Jewish soul throughout the world. Yossele's voice was humongous, and Caruso said he is so lucky that Yossele Rosenblatt was an observant Jew, because it would have been competition. The Edison Company said that they never heard a voice like the humongous volume of Yossele Rosenblatt, as you heard when we started the presentation, with actually a cinema and some live recording and videos of Yossele Rosenblatt. It is not an incident that Yossele Rosenblatt was offered $100,000 before 1930 to do Kol Nidre in the first jazz singer, and of course he didn't do it because he was such an observant Jew. So now we come to one little corner which we call the opera fever. Many great cantors had the opera fever. Some made it to the opera. I also had the opera fever, but it was much easier to be a cantor in those days. Among the great cantors and opera singers ranks the name, of course, of Richard Tucker and Jan Pierce and Joseph Schmidt. We also mentioned a later generation, a cantor by the name of Seymour Schwartzman, Abraham Melamed, and of course the great Neil Shikoff, whose father was a great cantor, Sidney Shikoff. So here are three examples of the greatness of this Richard Tucker, who was, by the way, beloved by Italian, because he sang Tosca like he sings Zechor Chamecha. Okay, this is a sample where he starts very soft and then he goes went. This is, of course, an art of improvisation that was written by Sholom Sekunda. Even though it is an East European outpouring of emotion, it's a very beautiful, very difficult composition. But now listen to this.
Recitar mentre preso dall'elirio non so più quel che dico e quel che faccio eppure dopo staccati sei tu forse il
This doesn't sound like a cantor. Before I joined the IDF, my family came to my sister's wedding in Tel Aviv. Richard Tucker sang in the Man Auditorium in a concert version, La Forza del Destino. And it was unbelievable. But the audience was screaming, Chazones, Chazones, Chazones. He says, if you want to hear Chazones, he put out the kippah, I forget what piece it was, and he says, next Shabbat, I'm in the big synagogue in Tel Aviv, come and listen to me. Jan Pierce is another story. He was a very dear friend of my uncle, and I knew him very well personally. He was a sweetheart. Glorious voices, but listen to this song.
Why the world of hope and joy I see, because you come to me. Because you speak to me in accent sweet, I find the...
You got the idea. Joseph Schmidt was a cantor, even though we call him just Joseph Schmidt, was a great recording artist, and he has a few cantorial pieces, but the most famous that he did was the German Kedusha. Lewandowski in Berlin, of course, wrote in the vernacular, and there's a very famous Kedusha, which is sung in German. I sang it in Kristallnacht commemoration in Hanover a few times. Glorious voice.
Oh
You got the idea, because I didn't have all the pieces there, but even though I want to make a little bit shorter. These are the cantorial grant of operatic style. Heina Azarenu Rachamecha is one of the great pieces, which the text is from Nishmat Kol Chai in the morning, right before Shochenad, and these four gentlemen giants are the Kusevitsky brothers. So I will not do Moshe, the king, or David, the the next king, but Simcha Kusevitsky, who is the incredible Chazan. I wanted to hear short, 3 little sections of a big piece that Yossele Rosenblatt wrote, which is cantorial, opera, and finish up with cantorial. Many of you probably who know Chazanut will understand it, but I just wanted to dissect it for you. Okay, this is the middle part. It isn't it like opera? Absolutely like Verdi, but listen to the end. Do you understand why these people were ruling the earth? There are other people that rule the earth today with beautiful melodies and congregational singing and very talented people, but it's a different era. This gentleman, I will at one point write a thesis. He is the one and only one. I was at his feet from the age of 10 until he passed away in 1964. There was nobody like him before. This man spoke to God. This man spoke to God. This is a plaque, maybe 5 houses from where I lived in Tel Aviv, in the Ben Gurion Boulevard. It says here lived the great Leib Glantz. He spoke to God. That's a whole different subject, and I'm not going into it. Just listen to just a few phrases, and then I have a little surprise for you. Leibglans is worth exploring. Just go The Night Project, which is an incredible piece that was done 3 times in Kaliningrad, in Vilna, and in Hanover, where 20 compositions were orchestrated by a friend of ours, very talented orchestrator, Cantor composer, Joseph Ness. And in between the pieces of music, where Glantz really speaks to God, there are narration from Elie Wiesel's book, The Night. It is something to experience. My dear friends, I would like to do it the next 15-20 minutes. I showed you a little bit of the great cantors, and you'll see them in a minute as well. But I have a little surprise for you, even though I can still call him in the Dor HaZahav, because he was gold. He was Dor HaBrillianten. This is, of course, you own Louis Danto Grisha. You all know his voice. You know, you've heard it. I participated many times in programs and concert with him. And you know his voice. We don't have to do it now. And I just decided, actually, Ruchama helped me to find this, a little bit of his greatness, never mind his vocal art, but his neshama and his love for kids. Listen to this. I thought that this was a very great tribute for Grisha, for Louis, for not only for his glorious voice, which really was not matched with anybody else, but also his sweet neshama and his love for. So here's actually a connecting chain between that generation. I'm not that much younger than Grisha. The next generation of cantors, my own colleagues and myself, linked to every opportunity to listen to our teachers and our mentors. We hunted them down at every convention. Moshe Genshov, how do you do this dreidel? Reb David Kosevitsky, why did you go there? Israel Alter, how do you know the Stimmung? How do you keep the atmosphere of the piece? I must confess, it took years and endless hours of mentoring, rehearsing, and imitating a style so far removed from our own daily culture. Yet it resonated deeply into our souls. So I ask you to mute yourself because somebody has his thing open. So here are just a few examples of a teacher and a student demonstrating phrase by phrase of some of the most difficult improvisational cantorial recitatives. And I believe because of its complexities, there must be a symbiotic and umbilical connection between the master of this and the student in order to be able to deliver the phrase in its authenticity. This art of improvisation, freestyle, is complicated. It is structured and based on tradition going back thousands of years, woven with it a sophisticated system of modality which requires a deep knowledge in the structure of the prayer text. Therefore, there must be a personal and closer relationship between the master and student. So just to start it, here's a boy of 13 and a half with my teacher, Shlomo Ravitz. That's what I sounded before I started. Okay, I now want to share with you a few phrases of large compositions, the way the master sang it and the way the student sang it. So this is Al Chait, Al Chayenu from Modim Anachnu Lach. The same piece, just a phrase. Next piece, Elu Devarim. These are two very important chazonis pieces that every cantor sings it. Here's a phrase from Hashkivenu. This is not imitation. I bled over every of this. This is my shtibel where I was bar mitzvah in Tel Aviv, from the shtibel to Pirchei Kodesh. Here is getting a little bit more serious because you cannot do Genshov, because Genshov is by himself a king of the golden age. It was my teacher.
ze olo.
This is the piece, but it's not the way it's written. It's written this way. I use these samples when I teach, when I coach my students from either Hebrew in a college or Geiger, not to show off, but to explain how you get with your own kishkesh to the same place. But here's getting a little bit more incredibly beautiful. So this is from אתה יודע שתסלח לנו על כל חטאותינו. The way he improvises in a concert, and the way it's written. Of course, this is improvised, and you cannot believe, I should believe, because it's a fact known that I sang this piece on Yom Kippur at Holy Blossom. Here I wanted to show you the opposite. First I used to do the master and then the students. This piece, Hashir She'aleviyim, is a psalm that we chant or we sing and we pray on Shabbat. And every day there's one little statement, and it comes to Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, Pashabas hayu omrim. So it's one of the great pieces that Genshov and Israel Alter wrote together. It's attributed to Genshov, but I was there in his apartment where Genshov asked my uncle how to do this and this phrase. So that's the way it should sound. Not the way it should sound, this is the way it's written. Okay, now look what it does. He does a chult, a Shabbos Kiddush chult.
Bashabas oyu merim hoyu merim. Mizmor shir,
This is a beautiful lullaby, but listen what happens here, and I'm finishing in 2 seconds.
Shabbos, Shabbos. Menucha, Menucha,
The Yom HaShabbos, he gives all his soul into the word and the meaning of Shabbat. By the way, he didn't sing it in a concert with the orchestra like this. This is the ingenuity of Mordechai Sobo Zal, who really elevated Chazanut to heights that were never before. So he sang it in a concert with probably a piano or with a string quartet, totally improvised, or maybe with Danny Gilder just doing a piano arrangement. Then he took his voice off the recording and juxtaposed a symphony orchestra and an arrangement. In conclusion, I see myself linked to this sacred tradition. I've made it my life's mission to continue, uphold, and promote the values and the spirit inherited in this tradition. I am proud to celebrate and to be and live in this period of history. Chazanut is an authentic part and art of our people which expresses the very soul of our being. It reflects the mood of our people, spiritual and religious existence. The song and the interpretation of Chazan binds us and links us to a common destiny. בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. As in the olden days, and as today with the renewed energy, new insight and inspiration tied into our centuries-long tradition, I hope and pray to elevate our awareness and understanding of that glorious tradition, the golden age of Chazanut, even though it was my choice to retire in 2020. So the highest incredible piece that I attempted at one point to record is this piece here, Ava Rachamim, and you see me from the age of Bar Mitzvah all the way to my beloved Holy Blossom. Just listen, and then we'll open for a couple of questions until 12:30. My dear friend, I try to show you a little bit of what I experienced. If anybody wants to ask any question or make some comments, I hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, Alex has some questions. If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Hello, my dear friend Benny. Lovely to be here and join you, as usual. The dignity that you showed about the Cantor is absolutely spot on. I mean, it is elevated alongside the classics and opera. I just wish this generation would understand what they have, and it's not broken, but they throw it away. Any idea why, and any idea how we stop the rot and bring back what is something very, very special that is as good as any non-Jewish classical music that anyone has?
I skipped that sentence, so that's conclusion. There are those that say that the generation of the Golden Age is gone, but there are those who feel that it comes back in different ways and in different places. One of the great phenomena that happened is Itchamar Helfgott, who is a Chassid and a Frumi and a Haredi Jew, opened the window to the entire Orthodox community, and a lot of incredible cantors. Unfortunately, Orthodox synagogues do not hire cantors like the Conservative and Reform, and I must say that some of these East European wailing and crying and emotional things really do not belong in our generation. In Canada, in the United States, and the world over, where Jews live freely. And even if you saw the East European incredible choral compositions and the West European Sulzer and Lewandowski, it was all Mendelssohnian. So you have Pete Seeger and Debbie Friedman and younger generation who are not grown up with that, and the DNA of theirs is not the connection to the old generation. Therefore, there are people like Jackie Mendelson and other teachers who are teaching the essence of the traditional chanting of Chazanut. I said to some people that I even hear from my synagogue that I had a high holiday job in Hamilton, very conservative, but really conservative, because the rabbi is a Merkaz Harav, a yeshiva boy, who is totally egalitarian now, but insisted at every word of the high holidays, which I haven't done in 41 years. So I sat down and started to study Israel Alta's manuscripts and Kachko and all the stuff to make sure that I just don't fake it and I don't improvise it. As you know, Jerry Glantz, he feels that I believe in it as well, that it will come back within time. Maybe not in the glory and the incredible vocal artistry that the Kosevitskis and Glantz and but by the way, a lot of young people do sing Lev Glantz, which I've really surprised, not only Shema Israel. So
Benny, can I just interrupt you? So how do you explain the hundreds and hundreds of thousands that tune in or zoom in to the Hamptons to hear Nathaniel Hurst, or even on your own doorstep, Gideon Zelemaiah and Shashamayim with their, which is the old traditional, I would say, English Minhag Anglia style, which people, I mean, the shuls are crowded who want to hear the legitimate, real deal, not the rubbish. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to throw things out and not give the acknowledgement and say that the audiences or the people at attention know nothing. They only need or want kindergarten stuff. And that should not be so. If you treat people like children and give them their kindergarten, that's all they'll learn. If you elevate them to something higher, they will learn it. It's like starting with ABC, making a sentence, making a paragraph, and making a story. It's the same with anything. If you teach on a higher level with exams, to university level. You start with a BA, an MA, PhD, whatever it is. But if you stop, you're not giving the people the credit for what they are capable of enjoying or learning or feeling. The gefühl, the gewalt, the neshama, the vekas, you can't explain. It's improvisation as Cantor did, etc., etc. Our people need it more than ever with the anti-Semitism and the problems that are going on worldwide. We need achdus. It doesn't matter whether you're Reform, you're Conservative, you're Orthodox. Bring it back and give the Kehillas a chance to say wow again.
So Alex, we will hopefully, I would like anybody else to have a word too.
Slicha.
But no, you're fine. You point, every time that I hear you speak, you're so passionate about Jewish music. You should also know if you use your, I wouldn't even say musicianship, but musicality, because you're very musical. If you listen to Nathaniel Hershtik, he does authentic Chazanut. Even if he does Anenu for Slichot, which was an unbelievable piece, he does the authentic the authentic presentation, but he doesn't have the East European pogrom kind of krechts. He does, if you analyze it musically, he does it in a very modern place, and with a beautiful choir, which in the East European, Yossele didn't have those choirs, right? So, and also, I believe, like I said, in the 7th or 10th century, when the Oilem wanted, popular songs, that's what it is. I mean,
then you listen to Moshe Oisha and Malofsky, who were way beyond the time that they sang, and they brought syncopated sound and jazz and everything, but it did not lose the devekas or the feeling of the chazanot, even though it was so modern. It was jazzy, syncopated.
Okay, we should continue. As you asked me to come to one of your conversation thing. We'll talk about.
I'm interviewing you in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Anybody else wants to say? Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate.
Love you very much.
There was another question from Alex. He wanted to know why the USA chose Eastern European Nusach and not Western European.
They do study also Western European, because I'm teaching at the Geiger School in Berlin, and I don't want to diminish the importance of the Hebrew College and the seminary, the theological seminary, but they don't do so much of the Western European tradition. Mind you, the one and only Dani Mutlu from the Cantors Synagogue in New York, who sings most of his stuff with his kakameme guitar and everything, which if she lets him do it, he is one of the most incredible chazanim, not only in Glantz, but he does Schlossky and all the other great masters in the most authentic way. So the schools do teach, and many times I have all the books here of the out of print classics, which Professor Eric Werner gave it to me when I was 21 years old, when I came to the Hebrew Union College. That's right, and they do the tradition of Sultan Levidotsky, which is much pure. It is much more pure than some of the layers of the Koleraturas and the Kosevitskis and the development of the classical golden age of Chazanut.
I'd like to call on Ruchama now to thank Benny.
Okay, thank you very much, Cantor Maissner, or as I call you, just Benny. Since we grew up together. By the way, Benny was my father's student in Tel Aviv. So we really know each other. What can I say? Wow. As much as I know you, your background, your knowledge of Chazanut and music in general is absolutely amazing. You are not only a cantor, you are you play the violin. You are an excellent choir conductor and music teacher. And by the way, the Holy Blossom really was lucky to have you. You really gave them a lot, really. With all this knowledge, you succeeded to focus on the title of this presentation, Bayamim Hahem. This could be a course by itself. There is no question about it. And Bazman Hazeh. So you really, I just enjoy everything, and keep up your you to do what you're doing. You are not you cannot finish your job. So
Ruchama, listen, Ruchama. First of all, my Rabbi Marmor used to tell me in Yiddish, "Mach dich nicht so klein, bist nicht so groß." So don't make yourself too small. You're not so big.
No. You are really enough. What you're doing so much, and you know so much, and you teach so much all over. Bernice said it in the introduction, how much you are all over the world. Really, keep doing it. You cannot stop. When you don't, I know you very well. When you don't have one day what to do, you don't feel well.
Exactly. Anyway.
Just anyway, keep it up. Thank you very much, Benny.
Ruchamale, I love you. You are like my sister. I know we know each other for many years. Except that I was a boy chick in Kita Dalet, and you were already a few years older than me. So, but as things are shrinking, we feel like anyway.
But we still well, maybe we will continue to meet every Friday for coffee in Second Cup.
Bernice and Eric, I do have an availing to go, but if anybody else wants to say something or ask, please, and contact me. Very soon you'll see my outburst website, which is so big that it's unfriendly, and I have to spend a lot of time and money into fixing it. My YouTube channel has 400 links. My YouTube channel. So anyway, and I see a few people that I know here, and I treasure you coming to. I don't want to mention names, but you know who I mean. All my friends and loyal friends, and Bernice, Eric, you want to wrap it up?
I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to echo Ruchama's wow. The chazanut you presented touched my heart. And I also want to thank Eric for his assistance. Thank you, Andrea, for jumping in. And I hope to see you all again soon at another music program.